So, I want to talk about After. Yes. Yes, that After. The After that is Harry Styles fan fiction and was turned into a book series. Now, note, I'm only going to talk about the first book because I only vaguely know the events of the second book and I haven't read it. I don't have any fucking idea of what happened with the third book. And, well, I don't want to talk about books which I don't understand. And I think I understand the first After book. I hate it, but I do understand it. So, first, let's address the obvious elephant in the room that this is one of many stories where a male love interest is allowed to be toxic and horrible and abusive towards the female lead just because he's hot. It's fine. I can change him. Honey, you can't. You are not obligated to change your partner. They should change for themselves. You shouldn't try to change them because it's not your responsibility to change anyone. You can try, but it's not your responsibility. You shouldn't change, or at least you shouldn't be obligated to change a person. You shouldn't do that. But all these stories seem to believe that that's exactly what you should do. Twilight less so because Edward isn't really seen as a bad boy. Or at least Stephanie Meyer let go of that illusion pretty quickly and just accepted he's perfect. Which he's not, but the books never acknowledge, or at least don't acknowledge enough that this is a horrible toxic relationship for both of them because they're codependent on each other as shit, but that's not the point. More specifically, I'm referring to 50 Shades of Grey, where Anna consistently thinks, I can fix him, even though BDSM is technically a lifestyle practiced by healthy individuals and doesn't only exist because of trauma. Yeah. Now, I was going to mention The Kissing Booth, but then I remembered that the book or the movie never really acknowledged Noah as, toxic. The only concern Elle ever has about him is that he cheats. And that's about it. Even though she should probably be a bit more concerned. But After explicitly calls out this relationship and never thinks maybe these two people aren't right for each other. Maybe they should take some time apart for a very, very long time. No, After doesn't acknowledge this in the slightest. And all these other stories I can kind of get. I hate 50 Shades of Grey with every guts I have, but I can still kind of get why people like it. I can kind of get why people like The Kissing Booth, because, okay, I actually can't understand that. Because, I don't see the benefit. But I can understand Twilight and 50 Shades pretty well. Because, vampires kind of have that mystique. And I guess girls like mystery. Personally, I don't, but some girls do. And I guess that makes sense. Also, that whole concept of, oh, he's gonna protect me because he's physically stronger and, a little fucking monster who can rip out the heart of anyone who wants to hurt you is a pretty appealing concept, I suppose. And as for 50 Shades, well, Christian's rich and people like financial security. But for Hardin, I don't really understand it. Because Hardin isn't, supernaturally strong at all. Or at least if he is, it's never acknowledged or brought up. And while he is at least rich and, his father does have some involvement with Tessa's school, it's very rarely ever used in the story, and it's never really acknowledged all that much. The only framing in which Hardin's father is acknowledged whatsoever is, his daddy issues. and that's about it. So I don't really understand the appeal of Hardin Scott whatsoever. And I'm a person whose husbando type for a long time has daddy issues, is temperamental, but has a secret soft side. By all definition, I should be eating this shit up like it's my favorite food. But no, I hate this book. I hate this book with every fiber I have in my body. And part of that might be because my friend actually started reading that book instead of the book I gave to her to read. Maybe there's some leftover saltiness there, but I don't think it's substantial enough to explain my hatred for this book. So let's begin by discussing the moral implications of a 25-year-old woman writing about a 19-year-old kid. Fun. Now, I don't think that Harry Styles personally really cares. I mean, from what I heard, he blocked Anna Todd on Twitter. But to me, like, writing a self-insert fanfiction about a real person is a bit morally dubious, to say the very least. Not to mention that she was married and had 3 kids at the time. Yeah. Now, again, this isn't really that big of a deal as everything else in this book, because, again, Harry Styles doesn't really seem to give a shit. Nobody really seems to talk about that when they talk about After. I just wanted to briefly touch on the fact that she pretended to be 16 so she can write her weird self-insert fanfic about bad boy Harry Styles. I'm not thinking that this will defame Harry's reputation whatsoever, because quite frankly, it just won't. But again, it seems kind of weird and shady for her to lie so blatantly for some reason. So I briefly touched on that now. Let's move on to the actual story and the book. So let's begin with Tessa Young. Tessa. Now, Tessa is very clearly a self-insert because whenever a character looks like the author, it kind of brings up a little, how shall I say, red flag in my head. Basically, I'll show what happens when I learn about that. I'll show what happens. This author and the character of this story seem to look weirdly alike. See, that's what happens. That's how I feel. So, yeah, that was a big red flag for me. And to a point, this happens even in books I enjoy, such as 3 Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake, because I recently found out she actually has black hair and slightly resembles her heroines. But again, Catherine, Mirabella, and Arsino are all their own people with very distinct personalities, so I'm not all too concerned there. But where I am concerned with Tessa is the fact that she seems to be a bit, how shall I say, inwardly misogynistic towards other girls? No, Tessa is like really judgy. The moment she meets Steph, it's like, ugh, look at how she dresses. Like, I understand that sometimes you just have presumptions about people, and I get that, but you can't exactly assume she's of loose morale just because she has a guy in her room. Like, I don't have many close male friends, and yes, I do understand that Tristan and Steph start dating later on, but still, it seems a little presumptuous of Tessa to presume. Redundant. That sentence was very redundant, I admit, but it seems a little rude of Tessa to presume that relationship. It seems a bit morally questionable, to say the least. Like, again, I have not a lot of male friends, but what little male friends I do have, I do hang out with regularly, and they do come to my house when we hang out. Like, yeah. Well, at least they used to before this whole corona situation. Anyway, so my point is that Tess is a very judgmental person, which is fine if she wasn't a hypocrite on top of that. For example, how she constantly berates Hardin about being loosely moraled, and she constantly calls Molly a slut when she's just there cheating on her boyfriend, which again is not exactly the highest moral action someone could take, even though Tessa claims to be oh so pure. No matter what the story wants to tell us, Tessa is a horrible human being. She isn't the worst person ever to exist. Trust me, I read Moral Deficit. I've seen Moral Deficit, and Tessa Young ain't it, but she's not a good person, no matter what she might want us to think. And not only that, but Tessa is really, and I mean really boring. So her only defining character trait, aside from the fact that she's basically unrealistically naive, because trust me, at the age of 19, you would have had at least one sex ed class that would have taught you how a penis works and how it looks and how protection functions. And, you know, you would have fancied to touch yourself at least once. I've literally, tried that with in my shower several times, and I'm 15. I'm 15. And Tessa's 19. She would have done it at least once. At least once. Once. Nobody is this innocent. No one. No one. Okay, maybe not as perverted as some people, but not this unrealistically naive about everything. Come on. Unless it specifically states that Tessa is homeschooled and I just forgot because this book is so forgettable, she has no excuse to be this naive about sex. And that might tie into the fetishization of female virginity, which is very common in these stories. So, yeah. Because, you know, female virginity, oh my god, they're virtue. And basically, the philosophy of these stories is that you have to marry the first person who you have sex with. Basically for women, which is weird because all of the writers of these very infamous books are women. So it kind of baffles me. But regardless, back to the topic at hand of Tessa being boring. But her most defining character trait, aside from her being unbelievably naive, a bit of a crybaby, and, as I established, judgmental and hypocritical beyond belief, is that she doesn't like ketchup, which is in a faint attempt to make Tessa seem quirky. Now, I understand that sometimes you just need an interesting female character who will really stick out, and most of the time, authors' solutions for this are very odd. For example, she reads. Oh my god, she's so quirky. Or, she likes pants more than dresses? Oh my god, how original. Even though, you know, femininity isn't inherently a horrible, awful thing that, you know, stories pretend it is. But, never mind. And in Tessa's case, it's the she reads thing, because God knows that no one reads anything anymore, which is a total fucking lie, but whatever. People read plenty. Sure, it's a bit rarer these days, but being, you know, able to read and reading in your free time does not make you smarter than other people. The sort of content you engage with makes you a smarter person. What you're interested in makes you a smarter person. Everything needs some sort of intelligence. For example, being interested in sports doesn't make you less intelligent than someone who's interested in architecture. But, like, this is such a common stereotype to make your female character seem interesting when in reality she's the most boring person. And Tessa's a bit... Oh, yeah. There's also, her being super organized, which, if she had OCD or, like, needed control of her life, and Hardin kind of helped her out of that, like, he's this guy she meets on campus, and he's like, ooh, what if she Get out of your head! Okay, I'm actively trying to improve this story, and I think I'm going to explode if I try. So, basically my point is, Tessa is kind of not that great as a character. She's not interesting enough to be memorable, but she's not likable enough that I don't care. That, like, I can just find her inoffensive. She's a horrible person who is just has no redeeming qualities as far as I can see. But now let's move to Noah, because bringing up Tessa, you have to bring up Noah a bit, because Noah is consistently panned by After fans for the simple offense of being boring. Which is never really a criticism I understood, because I don't actually hate Noah. Sorry, I'm just checking for fire and pitchforks, which people will surely bring to this house once they find out I actually like Noah. Yeah, I actually like Noah. Sure, a lot of people prefer Trevor or even Hardin, but personally I think Noah's fine. I mean, sure, he's not that interesting, but neither is Tessa, so in a way they're kind of perfect for each other. But what I'm trying to say is that the book consistently acts like, you know, he's committing the worst crimes ever known to man, when in reality he's just, you know, fine. Now, one thing I noticed in the comments of the actual fanfiction, even though I did read the book, was that people act like Noah is talking over Tessa when he's not. Not really, anyway, because, well, Noah isn't really talking over her at all. He asks her how her day was, she gives him fine, and then he goes on. Like, it's not Noah's fault that Tessa doesn't talk. I'm not saying that it's great for him to, like, just not try to pursue it further, but it's not exactly the sin of all humanity that some people act like it is. And then there's what I'll tentatively call the drinking scene, you know, when Tessa drinks for the first time. Now, I'm not saying that it's unrealistic for someone her age to not drink alcohol, especially considering she was so sheltered. So I'm not going to complain about that. But what I am going to complain about is the fact that Hardin's concern for Tessa, or disappointment that she drank, is there when he hasn't known her at all and it's portrayed as romantic, even though he knows that she was pressured into it, and it has been established that she is a bit of a doormat. So yeah, and Hardin doesn't even know that Tessa doesn't in general drink. I mean, sure, he can assume, but he doesn't know. When, on the other hand, Noah, being disappointed in her for drinking and telling her mom, is treated as, how dare you be so controlling of me, how dare you do that. It's treated like that, even though, you know, Noah does know that Tessa doesn't drink, and would thus be surprised by the sort of behavior coming from her. And, you know, not to mention that he thinks she might, you know, get hurt or something on the way back because she drank. Sure, it's a bit of an overreaction, but it's not that horrible. Not to mention that, you know, he doesn't know that she was socially pressured, so he could just assume that she's doing this out of some sort of spite or some shit. So I don't know. Not to mention that, you know, Noah actually respects Tessa's boundaries and, you know, doesn't fuck her without her consent and doesn't try to annoy. Oh, look! I'm supposed to talk about Hardin now. What? I don't know how that related at all. Okay, I'm kidding. Obviously, I know how that related. So, Hardin Scott. Now, as I said, I don't see the appeal of this character. He just seems like someone who would be exhausting to be with in real life. And to be fair to the book, it does kind of portray that they argue. All the time. All the time. Which is fun, I guess. But first, let's establish why I hate Hardin so much. It's because he is just a dick in general. Now, at first, Tessa hates him. And you'd think that this would be good for me. Like, you wouldn't think that because this is my first video. But in case you don't know, which you don't, I am a sucker for... They hate each other, but then they... Let's just say enemies to friends to lovers type. But just Tessa is immediately into him. It's just like... It takes, what, 20 chapters for them to kiss for the first time? I'm just stunned at how fast this happens. And not to mention that Hardin explicitly goes out of his way to annoy Tessa all the time. Which I would usually be for if he was likable in any way. Because, again, I don't like Tessa. And seeing her annoyed is kind of funny. But... you know, she explicitly asks him to not ruin her sociology notes, and he keeps going. She explicitly asks him not to call her Teresa. He keeps going. Not to mention that he consistently undermines Tessa's attempts to be a good person, which he does by her coming up to check up on him. He calls her pathetic, which is questionable at best. And then, let us not forget the bet. Let us not forget the bet. Yeah. This has to be brought up. And I don't care about spoilers. I don't give a shit. You probably already read this book. You probably already watched the movie. So you know this bet. You know this, okay? And even if you don't trust me, it's stupid. And doesn't make sense. But whatever. Basically, Hardin, on a Game of Truth or Dare that Tessa had on her first party, which there were multiple parties in the book. It was turned into one party in the movie. But, never mind. Basically, he makes a bet that he can make Tessa fall in love with him, which is the extent it goes in the movie. But in the book, it's the bet that she'll fall in love with him, and that he'll take her virginity. Which he keeps going, even when he established he has feelings for her. Now, explain to me, audience, what is the consequence of Hardin, like, getting out of this bet? Like, you know, just dating Tessa. Just fucking Tessa. I mean, sure, she would still be cheating on her boyfriend, but none of them seem to give a shit, so that's more or less okay. The most he would get is, like, a ruining of his bad boy image, and that's about it. I think. I mean, he could just call it off and it's done. It's done, and then he can just date Tessa, so, yeah. And he keeps going anyway. And then, he shows them the bloody sheets. And the used condom. Which is just... Dude! You could have just told them you took her virginity. You could have just told them. Something, anything but this. Why? 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 There's so many ways the story could have been fixed. Like, maybe not have a Tessa... No. God, it's so bad. Not have Tessa have a boyfriend. Or... just don't... Like, maybe they make a bet with each other that he can take her virginity and they do that. Something, anything but this. Anything but this. Please, just Why? But that's not even the worst of it. That's not even the worst of it. The worst of it is that Hardin bet this whole twist, it doesn't make sense. Because Hardin basically had Tessa right then and there willing to fuck him. In the woods. And sure, he couldn't show them the condom, but if he was planning to go there to fuck her, which is the impression I got, then why didn't he bring a condom? He was gonna show it anyway. Why not just take her there in the woods? It would have shortened your time or something. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. Hardin has multiple possibilities to fuck her, and he doesn't take them until a certain moment. Like, he has multiple possibilities to fuck the shit out of her and finish this bet right then and there. And you can't tell me that in the woods it's because they got interrupted. Literally nothing was interrupting them. And the whole arguing with Tessa over everything also doesn't make sense, because if you want her to fall in love with you, maybe you don't want to put her on the brink of breaking up with you every fucking time you talk. Just, it doesn't make sense. Not to mention the fact that this story, like pretty much every other story of the genre, has issues with consent. For example, Hardin pins Tessa to the wall without her consent. Though I don't think you can really consent to that. And, yeah, he basically has issues with consent. This book has many scenes that make you question whether he raped her or not. Because it turns consensual. And Tessa never explicitly says she wants it. So, yeah. Not to mention, Hardin is also incredibly violent, which Tessa always acts like, oh, he'll never get violent with me. But let me just change that sentence a bit. He hasn't gotten violent with you yet. Yet. Tessa, it's not a matter of if he'll get violent. He will get violent. Don't wait for him to. I'm just amazed at how bad this relationship is. It's just, why? What's the appeal? I don't see it. On a smaller note, let's move to another point that annoyed me. The references to Pride and Prejudice in this book. Now, I haven't read Pride and Prejudice. In fact, I'm currently in the process of reading this, so I haven't read the book yet, but I have, in fact, watched the movie, which is, I know, not exactly the same, but close enough to the book. And, sorry to disappoint you, Anatod, but it wasn't that Elizabeth was into Darcy while he was being an asshole. She wasn't into him until he stopped being a jerk. That's the point. He doesn't change because of her. He changes for himself because he realizes it's pushing her away, but it's never her aim to fix him. And I swear, if I ever hear a sentence, Elizabeth Bennet needs to chill, which I know is from the movie and not from the book, I will strangle someone. I will strangle anyone who compares this relationship to Darcy and Elizabeth. I swear I will. And yeah, that's after. Like and subscribe. More videos are on the way.